if it needs to change, what actually does a curriculum or an approach as well need to look like if it's to be fit for purpose, if it's really going to equip entrepreneurs with the awareness, understanding and skills that they need to be able to function well within society and to fulfill the different roles that people see entrepreneurs as having. So, as I said, I interviewed people, I ran focus groups, and these are the findings that came out of that process. There needed to be a much, much greater emphasis on both individual and business health, not just focusing on the business, but also to look at the individual who was running the business. And with the a kind of more holistic approach to take into account the wider context of their lives, family, health, well-being, etc. There was a view that there was a great deal that could be learned from the COVID experience, that people, particularly the small business owners, had to be very flexible and responsive to the environment which was emerging. And there was a view that actually the curriculum needed to harness that experience, particularly looking at the ways in which people became more encouraged to support one another. One person who I interviewed commented on how before COVID, people didn't open up and say how they were feeling. There was a need to put on a front of being a successful business. But COVID almost allowed people to be much more authentic. There was a view that there is a competency framework in existence, which is the competency framework, and that an intervention or a curriculum could actually draw upon this by providing ideas and opportunities and resources, but also that could encourage people to take action around that framework. At the time of the research, there was a great deal around in the media around the Sustainable Development Goals, and about the kind of environment, social and governance aspects of running a business. And there was felt a need that this needed to be taken into account, particularly the 2030 agenda. But what's interesting, what's come out from this, and particularly the Sustainable Development Goals, is whilst there's a lot of awareness, there has been much less action, and that any curriculum needed to be able to support people in moving from the awareness and understanding of the challenges that we are facing in society and environmentally, and to encourage and support people for taking action. I'm going to stop there. I just wondered if anybody's got any thoughts on their views on what a fit for purpose curriculum might need to consider in entrepreneur education. I mean, please feel free to kind of talk, to share verbally. Kind of put your hand up, anybody? Ruth.
Thank you. So I work in university, and part of my role is to work with our teams that support both students being trained. There's about 8 courses that students can do to be trained as entrepreneurs with another topic. And I also work with other colleagues who work with academics to try to do spin-out companies and also support people in the community. So I can't answer your question, but I'm very pleased to hear that this is really being thought about, because I think people like me and our roles, we're being driven mainly by cash returns. Important. Some of those other factors are important. Certainly the things around ESG and sustainable development goals come into it a bit. But when you see what is championed and what is valued and measured, I would say that it's mainly driven by the level of cash investment that we can put in and the potential returns that the university can get. So not so much for the students, they can do their own thing, but for staff. So I'm super interested to hear about this perspective on it.
Okay, and I'm just remembering my time as an entrepreneur. My business advisor would always start the meetings by how much profit have you generated. Never once asked me what difference I had made to people's lives, and that's what my business was about. Miles, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, I'll just lower my hand now as well. I find this fascinating because it's not like law school or medicine in terms of a curriculum, in terms of skills and outputs and the likes, because anyone can be an entrepreneur, I think, at any particular stage of their life or their career and in different areas. I used to work a lot with common purpose in leadership, and some of the people I met were almost thrust into leadership, whether it was in the private sector or some in the not-for-profit sector. For example, a woman whose son was dying of heroin addiction and abuse found herself becoming a leader in terms of change in her local authority of how to deal with this. Now, she would have never have considered herself that. Now, if she'd been given a hand up in terms of some techniques and some areas to help her. So I think anyone can be an entrepreneur, anyone can be a leader. And I think that means they're not born, they are perhaps made, and maybe there's a predilection, but I just find the whole area fascinating, and the parallels with leadership and entrepreneurship. I think the Venn diagram will have a huge cross area.
Yeah, but it's interesting. When I became an entrepreneur, I thought, oh, I better learn how to do this, set up my own business. So I was put on the leadership and management course and became a chartered, member of the Chartered Management Institute. It did not prepare me for running a business. I can tell you about Hertzberg's hygiene factors and a whole raft of different theories, but in no way did it prepare me for running a business, not fully. And certainly didn't help me to manage myself. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Stuart, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Maureen, and really interesting. Thank you very much indeed. I think for me, there is something then around what is the typical composition of these curricula in terms of the programs that are already available. Do they have a slant towards what we might see as that more traditional view of a profit-driven entrepreneurship, where actually, as in the title of your presentation today, we're talking more about prosocial here. What kind of content is built into these curricula to have that focus rather than perhaps a financial one? I have a history myself. I've set up a not-for-profit a number of years ago and ran that with a social purpose to it, not financial in the slightest. And I went through no kind of training for that. I just kind of got on with it and learned what I needed to learn when I needed to learn it. So I'd be fascinated to understand how that's represented in some of these curricula. Thanks, Maureen.
Yeah, the curriculum that I found, and I've studied all the different ways in which it's delivered, is primarily delivered by government. 2 or 3 key things about business planning, about social media, and when the business has been running for about a year, it's then looking about recruiting and managing staff. Anyway, can I just take one more, maybe Martin?
Yes, yes, my background isn't teaching, but I had the experience this summer of supervising or teaching a virtual module at Glyndŵr University's MBA, and I was fascinated how strongly it came through that the topic was on the environment and business social responsibility, and it was fascinating how it came through from the literature that they were using, that in order to be a successful business in future, it was important to take account of these factors. And among other factors that needed to come into account was getting the right employees who would be drawn to something that was environmental, social, and responsible, and had good governance. I'm not quite sure how that fits into specifically being entrepreneurial, but I found it very interesting.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for that. So if you're okay, I'm going to move on and share with you the curriculum that I have developed. Now, what happened was, after I'd finished all these interviews and focus groups, I went away and did my kind of analysis, thematic analysis of all the data, picked out all the key messages, and then developed a curriculum which took all of this into account. I then, just one step before then, I designed probably about 100 learning and development activities that reflected some of the things that people were saying. And I was very lucky to be able to recruit some people who were happy to trial those materials, so adaptively trial them, which enabled me to sort of tweak them and improve them. So I'll give you an example. One of the areas of activity I looked at was financial viability. Feedback showed that people found that quite threatening. I then worked with a financial advisor to make it more accessible and more comfortable for people to use. I then went and I pulled the activities together, and you know, drawing on all of my research, this is the curriculum framework which seemed to be most appropriate. So it is made up of 7 units, and because people were saying that actually I don't want to go to university, I don't want to attend a course, the information or the training needs to be accessible. It needs to be in bite-sized chunks. It needs to be individually tailored to my needs. What I'm in the process of designing is an online intervention. So, and these are the 7 curriculum areas that the activities explore. So the first one is, how viable are you as an individual and is your business? With a view to, I think my thinking is that actually, unless they're viable, they're not really in the right place to be going to help other people. And this is unashamedly a reflection of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's actually based upon the Barrett values framework. And there's some more details at the end of my presentation if you want to know more about this. So one builds on the other, but each unit is completely independent. So the second unit looks at relationships, person's relationship with themselves, with others, with society. Then moving on to look at what is effective performance, how they manage change, how they evolve, how they transform. Then looking at aligning their purpose, their values with the activities of their business, moving on to collaborating with others, and to finally the higher kind of purpose of making a contribution to society. The way that I'm looking to evaluate this is to look at particularly what level people are at when they start the program and what level they are at when they leave the program generally. Evaluating by self-assessment, but also by getting feedback from other people, so 360-degree appraisal. So I'm looking to move into what is the proof of concept phase early next year. So I'm just beginning to recruit people to become involved in that.